Andy, you made a good point a minute ago about how do we know, are there ways we can prove to ourselves that what we're doing isn't harming the broader environment? And there's lots of ways to look at this. But obviously, pollinators and bees, honeybees in particular, are also indicators, right, of how healthy the ecosystem is. And you'd be surprised, these things can put up with a lot, but they're also having, bees are having an enormous amount of trouble. So let's talk a little bit about how you guys are approaching this here at Bethpage, and then maybe a little bit about the plantings around it. Like you said, might not look good now, but serve a real purpose later on.
Right.
All right.
So the bees were actually an effort of a former employee. Their mother-in-law, I believe, was a beekeeper.
Okay.
And that's how we ended up having a beekeeper here. So we had them in a few spots on the golf course near Victor's greenhouse, because we have a greenhouse where he propagates plants, and we tried it there. It was a little too close for people to be working around this many bees. And then we ended up settling them on after another spot or two. They settled here. It's been a pretty good area. I mean, we had the bees here during the PGA Championship. I mean, Brooks Koepka was right up there teeing off on the 5th hole, and we had, 250,000 bees over here. So it wasn't like we haven't had any reports of golfers being attacked by honeybees or any issues like that.
They're not aggressive that way.
Not particularly. I mean, like Victor said, you don't want to get too close, but if you're on the edge of the mat, it's usually pretty.
But when we see the beekeepers, they got the screen over them, they got the smoker, and that's just to keep them from, sort of swarming them a little bit.
Because they're actually going inside the hive, and disrupting them.
Part of the bees is that, that there's even a little bit of like everything. There's always controversy, even with honeybees, and then there are native bees and ground bees, and are they competing with food sources?
That's right.
Etc.
Because this is farming. What we need to understand about what we're doing is here honey farming. So these workers go out and they're working to come back and make the honey. And as they're out there sort of roughnecking around in the pollinator world, foraging, they're bumping around with natives and other ones that are more like, they're out having a good time pollinating because it's their native habitat. And here come these workers working to make honey. The studies are showing in urban areas, these kinds of imported foraging bees are crowding out the native species.
Native species, they're localized species.
That's right. There might be specialists that only are on that lesser celandine for the few weeks in the spring.
Blueberry plants.
Yep. Things that are ephemeral, spring ephemerals.
And they don't travel as far. Honeybees will travel great distances.
That's right.
Right. So they'll travel, to the end of the course. The localized bees, will go from here to over there. That's been their whole life. So that's why it's important for
We also have on some of the other gardens in the picnic area, and some of the other ones, the school garden. We'll have like other types of bee houses for native bees, like the mason bees. I know our ecologists will work with Girl Scouts. They'll make little mason bee houses and put those out there as well.
Very good.
Kind of keep an eye on the ground bees. Another good thing about the bees, it's whenever you try something new at all, it's a risk. There's a risk in trying anything new, and part of that was we have honeybees here, and one year they did not have a good year. Like they had a couple of hives collapse. Then they started to ask what we spray. So does that make me a little nervous? Of course. But in the interest of finding the truth, we had used, that was still back when chlorpyrifos was still a spray. So I'd say, we sprayed that, this is probably 10 years ago, we sprayed that once.
Yep.
We made a few ABW sprays. They did their assay, and it turned out to be the varroa mites and not the product. And then I over the years, we've talked about that where, we've eliminated our chlorpyrifos sprays.
A long time ago.
Yeah, 6-7 years ago.
And you had to use it longer. Annual bluegrass weevil is its own animal out here because you have had pyrethroid resistance on the black horse for years, as long as we've been coming around. So you had to have some different options why you would have used those things. And it's interesting, the varroa mite, the collapse of these colonies is related to so many things, not the least of which could be a hard winter too.
Right.
So it is good to have them there. It is good to sort of be transparent about those things. We tend to not be as transparent because of risk and fear of those things.
I think what you said, the indicator species is important because here you could, we have a structure here, so we see them. We really can't see our native bees as the same way.
That's right. We don't see them the same way.
What you said, the indicator species, that's important.
Yeah.
Whether or not you see the native bees, it would be the only other way to.
That's exactly right, and you'd have to look a lot closer because they're smaller.
And I know this year our beekeeper, she wants to do just to test the honey to see what plants they're
foraging from, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that one year, and the funny thing about that was a lot of them, they went to non-native species.
Yeah, non-native species.
Because they're non-native.
Well, these are either Italian or Russian bees. They're not.
They go to the Russian olives, I noticed.
All right.
Part of that too is with these gardens, and Victor said, same thing as turf, a lot of these gardens are very site specific. It could be very muddy, a little more dry. Any place you disturb usually leads to invasives, which leads to other management issues. And whether it was disturbance that happened, like Victor said, this was wood chips and stop signs and shopping carts in here, and then there's disturbances like that happen, and then how do we try to reverse it back to how it was? So that's getting a true native garden is
really hard.
Really hard.
Really hard. Even when it's away from the golf course, it's hard.
Correct. This will never be a native area due to the fact that we're sitting.
And let's be clear about things. We're not going to go down the nativist hole, but I think native is tricky to do in intensely urban areas where that urban area doesn't resemble the native habitat. You have the ability out here to create the native habitat because of the space and expanse that you have. And you have to have the soils and intention and smarts to do it. When you're talking about this to a community garden or a homeowner on a 50 by 100 lot, it becomes a very different animal to manage. So I think it is important to golf courses to recognize you get a bigger opportunity with the amount of green space that gives you flexibility that's harder for other people to do.
You need the terrain.
You do, you need it.
One very important thing to mention is that gardens, sometimes we'll hear things, Victor and I will kind of chuckle because we might see something about, well, just let the area grow up and turn it into a meadow.
Oh.
It needs to be managed. Like we've seen this, Victor is now going to other state parks and helping them manage some of these areas because it might be plantings with very good intentions, but if they don't have anyone to manage them, it's quickly overrun, and we need to find better solutions.
And the weed control is always the biggest issue, dealing with the plants you don't want there. All right, let's keep moving.